So guys, you're new to Baldur's Gate 3 or you've decided to pick an origin character for your first playthrough. I'm going to be listing all 7 origin characters, the pros, the cons, and I'm going to be telling you what I think about them in terms of the characterization, the story, how they play in game, to help you decide which origin character you want to choose for your playthrough. Now guys, I'm going to be assuming you have next to no knowledge about the game. If you're an intermediate or advanced player, I'm going to be covering that too, but primarily this is geared towards beginner players that want to pick an origin character and don't know who to choose and are just getting into the game. So guys, this whole tier list is fully timestamped and chaptered, so if you want to specifically jump to any one of these, you're fully free to do so. I've done it for your convenience so you can jump around wherever you want to go. So let's get into the first origin character, guys, and we're going to be looking at ASTARION. Now, I want to say right away, if you're a beginner to the game, I would not recommend picking ASTARION. He is a half-elf rogue. Rogues in general in Baldur's Gate 3 are one of the more tricky classes to play. They can be very powerful, but most of the subclasses require a little bit of finesse. And after playing ASTARION, after actually testing out the origin, I wouldn't recommend it for a beginner. I think in terms of characterization, he's quite strong. I think he has an interesting backstory, but I also feel like his personality may not suit everyone. He has a very dry sense of humor. He has a dry wit. If you like shows kind of like House MD or let's say like Frasier, if you ever watch that sitcom, you may like ASTARION because he has definitely that little bit of drier, almost British humor. So because of his inability to be accessible to so much of the player base and his a little bit harder mechanics, as well as his personality, which may turn certain people off, I'm going to put ASTARION in C tier, guys. I would not recommend playing ASTARION as your first character. I just think he's a little bit too complicated. Specifically, rogues in general need to utilize their bonus actions and need to utilize stealth a lot more than other characters. And because of that, they oftentimes don't deal a lot of damage at the start of the game. So you're going to feel a little bit underpowered at first and then gradually become more powerful as the game gets going. You start to get itemization and you start to understand how stuff is supposed to work. Again, not recommended for newbies, guys. If you're an immediate or advanced player, then ASTARION can be an absolutely fantastic choice. And I personally like him. So this isn't where I would put him in terms of tier list, in terms of likability, but I just feel that for the majority of players, he's a very bad choice as an origin character, and you need to build the party around him in terms of actually to kind of shore up his weaknesses. So that's not super good, I feel like, in terms of to introduce a player to the game. So ASTARION is unfortunately going to have to live in C tier. Let's move on. GALE. GALE, guys. GALE is actually a really strong choice. If you're just coming into the game, GALE is a human wizard. Wizards are very good in this game, guys. They're very good, and the reason primarily that's the case is because they can strike from very far away. So a lot of times, GALE, you're going to be quite safe. You're going to be hitting from a long distance. You're going to be dealing a very considerable amount of damage at the start of the game. I think GALE is a very good choice for a beginner. A lot of his spells are kind of simple. You point and click and deal a lot of damage. I think GALE is an interesting character. He has a personality that I feel like is going to be accessible and kind of likable by the majority of the audience. In contrast to ASTARION, where you have that very dry British humor, GALE has a much more human story, I would say. And I really like GALE. The more I actually play with GALE, the more I empathize with his personality and decisions. He's not a perfect human being, but I think that actually makes him more likable because you can really see the human flaws and you can kind of relate to GALE on a personal level. So because of his ease of use, really powerful spells. Another big thing about Wizard that I wanted to note here is because of all the schools of magic for Wizard, you can really change GALE as he starts to level up more to your playing style. So you have a character that has strong base damage and is kind of simple to play because you can hit from range, so you don't have to worry about movement as much. However, you also can customize him in a very strong way. So because of this, I don't think Gale is perhaps the strongest origin character, but I think he's perhaps one of the more accessible origin characters. I'm going to put him in the solid A tier. And if you're a beginner or player, I think Gale, if you like his look and you like the idea of playing from range, Gale is a extremely good option, and I would highly recommend him. So let's move on now to KARLACH. KARLACH is a tiefling barbarian, guys. Barbarians are, in my opinion, the single easiest class to play if you are beginning to get into the game. Me and my wife in our co-op playthrough, my wife plays a barbarian. She deals more damage than me. She generally survives longer than me. It's an easy class to play in terms of you need to get up front. You need to use your rage and probably eventually frenzy to actually deal damage and basically hit things. You're very tanky. You have high HP. The class is extremely simple to play in terms of what you're supposed to do. You're basically supposed to engage your rage or frenzy, run up and either take damage or hit things, and that is how the class is supposed to play. So KARLACH also has an absolutely amazing personality, an amazing story. There's nothing about KARLACH in terms of class, in terms of characterization, in terms of story that isn't S tier. KARLACH will easily be going into S tier. And honestly, guys, there's only two here in all of this list that I would say are perfect for beginners, and KARLACH is one of them. If you want to have a situation that is just an absolute easy playthrough, play KARLACH. I think you can kind of choose anybody around KARLACH and still do well. But KARLACH, because of her extremely high HP, very simple gameplay mechanics, and just how well she is characterized in her story, is one of the strongest origin characters that you could be playing. Another really good advantage about KARLACH, guys, that a lot of people don't mention is KARLACH isn't as accessible right at the beginning of the game. She's a little bit harder to find than, let's say, GALE, ASTARION, or let's say LAE'ZEL, SHADOWHEART, pretty much everybody else. WYLL is actually easier to access as well. So because of all of these reasons, if you're picking an origin character, other than the Dark Urge, you're probably the best off with picking KARLACH. I do think KARLACH is the probably strongest choice for beginners, especially. But because of her characterization and story, I think she's honestly a very good option for anyone. So let's move on to LAE'ZEL. LAE'ZEL is going to be a very divisive choice, guys. Now, LAE'ZEL is a Githyanki fighter. Fighter is a good class in of itself. It's pretty simple to play. It has a lot of damage, but it's less tanky than barbarians. But you can customize things. Another great thing about LAE'ZEL in general and fighters is you're going to be able to use most of the armors in the game. You're going to be able to use most of the weapons in the game. So because of this, LAE'ZEL is a good option if you really don't know what you want to play with. Maybe you're thinking, oh, well, I may be playing with a straight sword. I may be doing sword and board. I may be doing like a two-handed weapon. I really don't know what I want to play, and I want to get into the adventure, and I want to kind of discover it as I go along. I think because of this, LAE'ZEL is strong. Now, her personality, basically, guys, is divisive. I'm going to say that right away. If you like really strong female characters and very assertive female characters, you may really like LAE'ZEL. But the problem with LAE'ZEL is primarily that it really is her way or the highway. There isn't much compromise. There isn't much negotiation. She also is a character that you should not play if you want to role play anything of like actually using dialogue or using your wits to solve a situation. LAE'ZEL's point of view, and most Githyanki, but specifically LAE'ZEL's point of view, is that we should barrel through a problem, and if anybody stands in our way, we should kill them, pretty much. So that's something you have to understand. If you like that, then LAE'ZEL is going to be a fantastic character to play, but she doesn't have as much flexibility as other characters. And because of that, in terms of how a story unfolds, I think that LAE'ZEL's personality and her playstyle probably limit her. I'm going to be putting her in B tier. I do think she's a good option, honestly. And I think as a strong female character, I love LAE'ZEL. If it came down to my personal opinion, I would probably put her in A along with GALE. But really looking at this and understanding that, not everybody shares my opinions in terms of what I like personality wise, I really can't put LAE'ZEL in either A or S tier just because of these limitations. You are mainly a melee fighter. You do have kind of very limited dialogue choices, and dialogue is so strong in this game, guys. A lot of times, charisma and dialogue is honestly better than it would be to fight a situation out. So because of this, and because I feel like if you are a fighter and you just want to wreck through everything, you're probably better off going with KARLACH. LAE'ZEL, you need to kind of build the team around her a little bit more. So that's why I'm putting LAE'ZEL in B tier. Not a bad choice, but not the best choice in my opinion. Let's go on to SHADOWHEART. SHADOWHEART, guys, is very interesting. Number one, I want to say about SHADOWHEART, clerics in this game can be very strong. Now, if you hear a lot of people from the Dungeons and Dragons community, or if you go on Baldur's Gate 3, like the Reddits, you're going to hear that clerics are the best characters in the game. SHADOWHEART is amazing, and basically she's, clerics is just god tier. If you're a newer player to the game or don't understand the D&D rule sets and you're coming into this, and that's why I'm assuming you're watching this video, I would highly dispute what they're saying. Now, clerics are good and they can be very strong in certain situations, but compared to like barbarians or wizards, in my opinion, clerics are a little bit harder to use. You have spells, but a lot of the spells are support spells. And another thing is, she's in the trickery domain in terms of clerics, which isn't the best subclass. So what I want to say about specifically about SHADOWHEART is obviously you can respec her, you can customize her. SHADOWHEART is an origin character that is strong to play. Her character and personality, I think, are going to appeal to a large amount of people. She is a little bit hidden, and her story takes a little bit longer to open up. So actually, if you look at my tier list for the companions in the game, you see I didn't rate SHADOWHEART very highly. Now that I've gotten a little bit deeper into the story and been able to play the full game, I will say that I think SHADOWHEART is actually a lot better than I originally thought. But if you're watching just the opening hours of the game, if you're playing at the beginning, SHADOWHEART may not appeal to you. And so what I would say is if you pick SHADOWHEART, stick with her a little bit. She gets a lot better as the game goes on. I do think her personality is quite good. I do think she's valuable in most team compositions. So like Gale, I think she's a good pick. However, I think she is harder to pick than Gale, or actually harder to play for a newer player than Gale. A lot of her spells are a little bit non-intuitive. You have to kind of figure out when you should be blessing, when you should be healing, when you should be using these support spells. So because of this, I just don't feel she's as good for a newer player. I'm going to put her in high B, low A tier. So she's going to be in front of LAE'ZEL, right behind Gale. Really, it could either be really high B or very low A. SHADOWHEART's a great champion to play, a great origin character. However, as a beginner, I would not suggest you pick her for your first playthrough. I think it's much better to get her as a companion and kind of build around her in the team and use her as a support rather than play her as the main character of the game, if that makes sense. So let's now move on to the Dark Urge. What do I think about the Dark Urge, guys? Well, I'm going to say this specifically. The Dark Urge is basically a custom character. So it's hard for me to rate him in terms of the other origins where you have a specific class and a specific story. Now, I will say this, guys. In terms of story, I think Dark Urge is S tier. So if you're just looking at story, I would put the Dark Urge right behind KARLACH. I think the Dark Urge is absolutely fantastic. I don't want to spoil anything, guys, so I'm not going to be telling you what I've learned about the Dark Urge, but I do have a playthrough where I'm playing as Dark Urge. I personally think the Dark Urge is amazing story-wise. The thing about the Dark Urge is you can kind of play as a good guy that's fighting evil, or you can play as a bad guy that's like despicable monster. The Dark Urge is just a very, very interesting way to play the game. But because he's a custom character, I could not recommend the Dark Urge for a newer player. So I want to put that huge asterisk because you're basically building a custom character and then just having an origin backstory. So the Dark Urge is unlike any other origin character in this game. I wouldn't say that he's very friendly to newer players, so I'm going to be pulling him down here into A tier. Um, it's hard for me to put him below A tier just because I feel the story and the characterization is so strong, and because I feel like it's one of the most interesting ways to play the game. And really, it's one of the only origins that you're not really getting a full, you're not getting a full custom character. So you are getting backstory and stronger characterization than if you had a custom character, but you have the ability to pick your class. So unlike almost every other character in the game where you have to respec, here you can basically start out as any class. You can play the Dark Urge any way you want. So I think that it's really unfair to put him under A because of all of these positives. But because you're completely building the character up and you can make a horrible mistake and basically make a character very hard to play, it's really impossible for me to put him in S. So I think A, probably a little bit behind Gale, is where he deserves to be. What do I think about WYLL, the final origin character? WYLL is a great character, guys. Eldritch Blast is very good. He's a human warlock. He has a very good story. This picture probably will kind of give you a little hint about what his story might be. I'm not going to spoil anything, guys, but WYLL has one of the more interesting stories in the game. I think WYLL's story is a little bit more engaging than a lot of people's. Probably a little bit more engaging than LAE'ZEL's. Probably a little bit more engaging than Gale's. Maybe about equal to SHADOWHEART's, and probably more engaging, in my opinion, than ASTARION's, and maybe a little bit behind KARLACH. So in terms of just story and characterization, I think WYLL is S tier. He's very good. What do I think about Warlocks? Warlocks, in my opinion, are a little bit harder to play than Wizards because I think there's a little bit less customization. You're kind of relying on Eldritch Blast a lot, but they're not bad. They are a little bit. WYLL is like he's a caster that can also do melee. So you have a bit more options than WYLL. I do think WYLL is a good choice if you're starting out in the game. It's really hard for me to put him in S tier because I do not believe that he's as easy to play as KARLACH. And I believe his story is right behind KARLACH's in terms of quality. But it is also my opinion that WYLL is a little bit... In terms of play, I feel like he's a little bit harder to play than Gale. So I think what I'm going to do with WYLL is I'm going to put him in between Gale and Dark Urge, because I think that's where WYLL is. His characterization, his story, what you're going to be discovering about him in game is very compelling. So you're going to be wanting to play him. And also, I feel like it's a little bit of a champion that isn't too hard to play. I mean, Eldritch Blast still is an incredibly strong spell. Warlock is good. There's not many negatives about WYLL, and I think it's definitely an origin that you would enjoy playing. I would not super recommend him for newer players, but if you're even like a newer, low intermediate player, or if you played for a few hours in the game, then WYLL is going to be a great choice. So guys, now we're summing up what I think. I wanted to give you a TLDR version. For people that don't want to watch the whole video, I respect your time. Let's get right into it and basically sum this up. In my opinion, if you're a beginner to the game, the best champion that you can play, the best origin is going to be KARLACH. She has an incredibly strong story. Barbarian, in my opinion, is one of the easiest classes to play and is incredibly strong. If you pick up certain feats like Tavern Brawler, you're going to be incredibly OP in this game. Barbarian is very, very good. There's nothing that is an S tier. Pick KARLACH if you're new to the game. If you do not want to play a melee character, your best option is going to be playing the human wizard Gale. I think he's very easy. I think his story is very compelling. And I think because you're hitting at range, as long as you're careful about your movement and careful about your positioning, he's an excellent choice for any beginner. He has a lot of great customization because there's so many schools of magic. Very, very good option. If you want to play the most interesting character in the game in terms of story, and you feel like you could handle higher difficulty, you can handle character builds, but you want to play something really unique, play the Dark Urge. I think he's the most interesting character in the game and probably the most interesting origin that you can start out as. If you like the idea of Gale and you like the idea of hitting at range, but you want to have a little bit more melee prowess, then definitely Will might be a good option. As a Warlock, he has a little bit more in terms of he can actually do melee attacks and it not totally suck like Gale would. But he still does a lot from range. I do think Will is a decent option if you're newer to the game. I would not recommend, guys, if you're starting out in the game, to pick SHADOWHEART, LAE'ZEL, or ASTARION, especially ASTARION. I would say, even though his character and personality is interesting, he's not going to jive well with a lot of players. I could definitely feel like a lot of people would be turned off by ASTARION, and his mechanics are by far the hardest. So definitely, if you take away one thing from this list, it is that if you play melee, KARLACH's probably your best option. If you want to play range, Gale is a great option. And probably steer away from ASTARION if you're a newer player. So guys, hopefully this tier list was very helpful to you. I'm really trying to get this content out. I'm going to be doing one video a day. Please like and subscribe. It makes a massive difference on a small channel like me. Every single like helps with the algorithm, and every single subscription really helps my channel to grow. I really hope this was helpful to you guys. I can't wait to see you in the next video. I'm going to be doing a lot of build orders guides like Guts from Berserk. I'm going to be making a video about Jon Snow from Game of Thrones. So if you're interested in that, definitely stay tuned. But I will see you guys in the next one.